Be sure to check out MythvisionPodcast.com. Help Mythvision grow, guys. Become a Patreon member. You guys will get early access to all of my videos when I'm done editing them. Also, it's a small community where you guys can message me your questions and talk to me in private. You guys can donate also through PayPal. Join our social media links down in the description. We have Twitter and Facebook groups. Help the community of Mythvision grow. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Hit that bell button so you're notified every time I do a live video and you don't miss any of my content. Like this video and comment your thoughts below because I want to know what you think about all of these things.
Dr. Price, we had a question last week. I think you touched on, without having the exact answer yet, in our last video on this topic. And the gentleman goes by SENCORBRN33U. And we might have skipped this question. I'm not sure, but I know that we were waiting to get the response because it was a peer review question. He says, I am interested in any peer review source or any source by any respected religious scholar you might attempt to give for this claim that there was sacramental eating of gods as breads, or as bread. Good luck, and it also makes me question Robert's, Dr. Price, your scholarship, not seeing that the Eucharist is a clear allusion to Judges 6:20-22. And there's the question. So technically, he's saying, how could you
be so stupid?
Be so stupid to think that eating the flesh and drinking the blood of a god is other than Judges 6:20-22. You know, it doesn't seem like there's any clear peer review scholar or serious person who ever takes that position.
Well, let's take a look at Judges 6:20-22. 19. So Gideon went off and prepared a goat, and an ephah of flour in the form of unleavened cakes. Putting the meat in a basket and the broth in a pot, he brought them out to him, the angel, under the terebinth, and presented them. The angel of God said to him, take the meat and unleavened cakes and lay them on this rock, then pour out the broth. When he had done so, the angel of Yahweh stretched out the tip of the staff he held and touched the meat and unleavened cakes. Thereupon a fire came up from the rock which consumed the meat and unleavened cakes, and the angel of Yahweh disappeared from sight. Gideon, now aware that it had been the angel of Yahweh, said, Alas, Lord Yahweh, that I have seen the angel of Yahweh face to face. And the Yahweh answered him, Be calm, do not fear, you shall not die. So Gideon built there an altar to Yahweh and called it Yahweh Shalom, or the peace of Yahweh. To this day it is still in Ophrah of the Abiezrites. That is supposed to be the basis for the Lord's Supper. I'm mystified at the suggestion, but as to whether actually, I think this is in connection with my oft-made statement that the Lord's Supper has no possible connection with Judaism. This bread is my body, this wine is my blood, take, eat. That the natural connection is with the mystery religions where you had especially Osiris and Dionysus and Demeter also, where they're gods and a goddess of grain and grapes, and that their devotees would consume the body and blood under the forms of bread, which is, of course, the body into which grain is made, and wine, because that was the blood of the god who was grapes, or grain, in which case sometimes the Osirian worshippers would have beer. But this, I think, is common knowledge, and I just went through a bunch of things and found some relevant material. This is from Bojana Mazsov, if that's how you say it. I don't know, it's some sort of Eastern European name. Osiris, Death and Afterlife of a God. And let's see, she says, all justified souls were admitted to the community of gods and spirits, modeled after the pattern of earthly society. The giving of bread and beer that issue from Osiris was not unlike the Christian bread and wine offered at the Mass of the Eucharist. Osiris, the good being, gave sustenance to the righteous and pointed the way to immortality with the shepherd's crook. Another one from, this was online, so I printed it out. This is from Vicky Bramshaw, Dionysus Exciter to Frenzy, a study of the god Dionysus, history, myth, and lore. She says the wine was considered akin to life blood of Dionysus and the power of regeneration. This connection of blood and wine remains today in Christian communion, where wine is seen as the blood of Christ. The bread of communion, however, was not originally believed to be the flesh of a male deity, but the body of the goddess, chiefly the goddess Demeter of the Eleusinian mysteries, during which grain, seeds, and fruit were used in a similar way. Then, from a very renowned book, this is Francis Lega's Forerunners and Rivals of Christianity from 330 BC to 330 AD. Let's see here, this is pretty interesting in terms of ancient sources. Let's see. Yeah, okay. The adoration of the sacred water as the emblem of Osiris, which we have seen represented on the Herculaneum fresco, has many points in common with the exhibition of the sacrament of the Mass to the people, and it is possible that the words of consecration were not altogether different in the two cases. Quote, "Thou art wine, yet thou art not wine, but the members of Osiris," end quote, says a magic papyrus in the British Museum in the midst of an address to Asclepius of Memphis. The god Asclepius being one of the gods with whom Serapis in his day of power, is also Osiris, was most often confounded. So too, Revelo, I'm mispronouncing that, has published an amatorium or love charm in which the magician says, "May this wine become the blood of Osiris," and so forth. And there's more. There's a couple of statements in the Barbara Walker's excellent book, The Women's Encyclopedia of Myths and Secrets, where she talks about, in her articles on Osiris and Dionysus, where she mentions how the bread was the body of grain gods and the blood was the wine and so forth. And so there's, and again, I've read this numerous places, and I don't think it's some sort of a myth, and it's certain, I mean, scholarly myth. There are such things where you hear something and you try to find the basis for it, and there doesn't appear to be any, or something has been grossly misunderstood. I found that reading about Veda's messianic secret theory that several people, scholars who discuss it, have got it wrong. They didn't go back and check out what he actually said. So such things happen, but I don't think this is one of them. But any way you cut it, this judges thing, I'm missing the point of similarity there, how it could possibly have anything to do with the Eucharist. So, I must say I don't care for the attitude in this question, but it's also vacuous, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I'd like to poke a little more just to point out some things that I think are interesting. When Jesus gives this statement in all of the Gospels, but especially John. He makes this clear point of eating of his flesh, drinking of his blood, you will live forever. It's clear immortality comes from the eating and drinking, participating in this Eucharist. It's like it's a deep thing. He is suggesting you need to eat of my flesh and drink of my blood to live forever. Because the food you eat will go away. You're going to be hungry again. You're going to be thirsty again. He gave the same thing with the woman at the well in John 4. So John, the Gospel of John, seems the most Eucharistic in a sense. But also, it's clear that if you were to try and say, oh, it's allusions to the Old Testament, there might be allusions, but that's all they are, is allusions. To say that this is a mimetic connection that only goes to the Old Testament, that's the stretch. I think you're more onto something than what this person is suggesting. They're not looking at the possibility of outside sources, because the source they think it needs to come from is only the Old Testament. Yeah. They're not recognizing that or considering that. So when they say peer-reviewed or any scholars, these people you just listed, there's some scholars. And they would agree with what you're suggesting here. And I'm sure there's many more books out there that would agree with this.
If you wanted to see a biblical allusion, my old professor and friend, J. Ramsey Michaels, he tried to argue that this is a reference back to Wisdom's feast in the book of Proverbs. Wisdom says, I've laid my table out and all are free to partake, and there's a similar thing in Isaiah, and that Michaels thought that that's what Jesus is talking about, that his wisdom is the feast. That doesn't quite seem to make it to me, but that's at least a little closer to it. But the fact that you know that they actually did have a Eucharistic feast where they said, this is my body, this is my blood. The Ignatian epistles refer to it as the medicine of immortality, and that seems to me to be more consistent with John 6, the bread of life discourse. Another reason that's often not taken to be connected with the mystery religions, though to his great credit, Dennis MacDonald understands that, is that that would give aid and comfort to the Roman Catholic view of transubstantiation, and the necessity of taking communion to be saved, most New Testament scholars are Protestants, either by background or by their own faith, and they don't want that. They don't want to admit that there's biblical basis for some of the Catholic sacraments.
You read recently the Dennis MacDonald chapter where he talks about that in John 6. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah.
He talks about how the Dionysian hymns, in their songs, they talk about how the Titans chewed his flesh, talking about Dionysus, and ripped his flesh and drank his blood. It's like, what the heck is going on here? You know, they have immortality through this. It's just, I just think it's so interesting to see that. And then they talked about a ceremony that they would drop 3 jars of water in the temple and come back the next morning and they'd be wine. They'd turn into wine. Come on, guys. What illusion is there in the Old Testament that water turns to wine versus the Dionysian connection? I mean, so we're not opposed to mimesis to the Old Testament or any type of allusions or connections to the Old Testament. In fact, I will give you my 2 cents on this because I know that this is really a question to you, but we wrote an article, you really did all the hard work, on Osiris, Joseph, Jesus, and Josephus. And in the Joseph narrative, I put the connections of the Eucharist, to some degree, a primitive form of it, in the Joseph story. He's in prison, 2 men have dreams, one's the wine bearer of the Pharaoh, one is the baker. In 3 days, this is so interesting, in 3 days, after he tells him the story, look, you got 3 days, dude, and you're going to have your head on a pike, and the birds and the fowls of the air are going to eat the flesh off of your skin, talking to the baker. What does the baker do? Well, bakes bread You have your bread right here, your cornbread, your bread, your whatever you'd like to say. And then you have the wine bearer that he says, in 3 days, you're going to be established back to the position you were as the wine bearer for Pharaoh. You're going to be forgiven, pretty much. Which sounds like the two thieves, so to speak.
Yeah.
On the crosses. But also, they both, in 3 days, exactly what he said is going to happen. One gets killed. The other one goes to leave, and when he does, he says, listen, don't forget me. Don't forget about me, Joseph says to the wine bearer. And he goes to Pharaoh, and he forgot about him for a long time. And Pharaoh had a dream. And then, I know a guy. And he's down in prison. So to me, you have the wine bearer, you have the bread, the baker, and you have the don't forget about me statement. So the illusion of do this in remembrance of me, or do this to remember me, that might be an allusion to the Joseph story. But the Joseph story you point out in your article is an allusion to the Osiris cult. So you have either way, even if you want an allusion to the Old Testament, you still have an allusion to another cult type thing, where I think they could easily have pieced Dionysus in with this. They fused some of these things. And this is why when they eat, they get immortality. I think the Catholics are closer to understanding this is part of the Christian community of salvation, is partaking in this sacrament. Even though I don't ontologically believe it, I'm just making a point. Anyway.
Yeah, and by the way, when I speak of illusion, it's with an A. I know it's sometimes difficult for people to keep this straight, and we're not talking about illusions. And, it's easier if you're looking at it written.
Right.
And,
my accent might...
No, me too. That's why I exaggerate the A sometimes.
Illusion, yeah. But, I think that there's much to glean from this, and to say it comes from one source and not any other, to me that's also stretching it. That's why I love Dennis MacDonald. Dennis MacDonald is the man. I'm going to do a series on his work. I just communicated with him recently, so I look forward to that. But I hope this answers the question that was asked, and people can understand that you're not just pulling crap out of your head and throwing it out there like, see if this sticks. So